Do you know what waits behind a wooden door thick with soot hidden in the corner of a snow-brushed clearing? Tonight we step barefoot into a darkened smoke sauna in Ancient Karelia, where the birch logs are still glowing. The air is thick with steam, and someone just out of sight has already whispered thanks to the stones. Unless you can handle gossiping forest spirits at 90 degrees Celsius, you probably won't survive this session. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And tell me, where are you tuning in from, and what time is it there? I love knowing where these sleepy journeys are landing. Now dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. The door creaks open. You step inside. The warmth hits first, not hot like a flame, but soft, slow, thick. You inhale, and it smells like pine resin, wet stone, old wood, and just a hint of something herbal. Not medicine, not cooking. Maybe intention. The smoke has already cleared. It's a sauna, the kind with no chimney. The fire was lit hours ago, then doused. What remains now is heat, slow-breathing, peat-scented, and held in by every crack-sealed log and every whisper-darkened rafter. You sit on the low bench. The stone stove crouches in the corner, massive and waiting. You can't see the stones, but you feel them. Their heat curls up the walls, hugs the ceiling, clings to the water pail like a spirit unsure if it wants to leave. Someone dips a ladle into birch sap water and tosses it onto the stones. Hiss. The steam rolls down like a blanket. Your breath slows. Your shoulders drop. And you remember this isn't just bathing. This is returning. A mainstream fact in Ancient Karelia, the sauna was not just for warmth or washing. It was the heart of the home, used for birth, death healing, brewing, grieving, even storytelling. It was the cleanest place in the house, and the most sacred. And it asked for respect. You never entered without knocking, never cursed inside, never made big decisions or loud jokes. Even the firewood was chosen carefully. Spruce, if you needed heat fast. Pine, if you wanted it to last. Birch, if the spirits liked you that day. A quirky detail, some families believed the first stone placed in the stove must be thanked by name, or it would crack before midsummer. If you forgot, the stove might hiss the next time you touched the ladle, just enough to remind you who's in charge. You reach for a handful of birch branches, vichta, bound and soaked. They smell like leaf-laced rain. You press them to your skin, gently at first, then harder. A rhythmic pat, a sweep. It stings, but in a friendly way. Like a reminder, you're still here. Researchers still wonder if Karelian sauna rituals were shaped more by daily function or spiritual need. Some argue the practical sweat-out illness cook with steam soften the skin. Others see it as ceremony, every wash a purification, every heat wave a conversation with the unseen. You lean forward. The steam glows in the firelight. Someone is humming low, repetitive, without melody, but with weight. A sound that fills the space without asking permission. Maybe a lullaby, maybe a spell, or maybe just the way silence talks when you give it steam to stand in. You close your eyes. The birch bench is warm beneath you. The stones are quiet now. The breath of the forest presses gently against the wall, and the door stays closed. Not locked, just held. Because in ancient Karelia, the sauna wasn't something you used. It was someone you joined. The sauna breathes around you. Not literally, of course, but it feels that way. The air rises and falls like a chest at rest. The stones click softly as they cool. A ladle is dipped. Birch water stirs. Another gentle splash onto the stones. Another slow wave of heat rolls over your arms, your face, your thoughts. And in the corner, a soapstone pot rests on a wooden stool, still warm, still full, because tonight we sit with soapstone, that quiet, heavy miracle of ancient Karelia that fed healed and maybe even kept a few spirits on their best behavior. You reach out and touch the pot. It's smooth, cool now on the outside, but the inside, still warm. You lift the lid. Inside, a thick root stew pale broth, flecked with wild herbs, and something slightly bitter, maybe pine bark, maybe memory. A mainstream fact. Ancient Karelians used soapstone, a soft, easily carved metamorphic rock found in eastern Finland, to make pots, bowls, weights, even small stoves. Its heat retention is extraordinary. A soapstone vessel could keep food warm for hours, or let porridge simmer without flame. Perfect for long winters, and perfect for saunas. You ladle out a bit of the broth into a wooden cup. It smells earthy, comforting. It tastes like roots boiled slowly with wisdom. Not exciting, but undeniably anchoring. The pot beside you is darkened with use, chips along the rim. Someone carved a small spiral into one handle, not decorative, more like a signature or a prayer. You sip again, then lean back. The fire is low, the sauna quiet, but the soapstone pot is still working. Still holding heat, still remembering the moment it was pulled from the hearth and placed here because someone thought you might need it. A quirky detail, some families believed that if you cooked a healing stew in a new pot, you had to speak a blessing into it before the first boil. If you didn't, the stone would leak strength with every ladle. So even the most tired cook whispered to their cookware, just in case. Researchers still wonder whether soapstone was reserved for special meals, ritual feasts, healing broths, birth, stews, or whether it was simply the material at hand. But when archaeologists dig into old hearth pits and sauna sites, soapstone always shows up closest to the fire, and often closest to the bones. You look back at the pot again. It's stained with broth. And something else, maybe fat, maybe resin, but not forgotten. This wasn't discarded. It was chosen. For this space, this moment, this hush. Someone dips a cloth into the hot water bucket and wipes down the ladle. Not because it's dirty, but because clean tools make better steam, and clean steam makes better stories. You reach into a wooden bowl beside the soapstone pot and pull out a chunk of bark bread, dense, chewy, made with rye and tree. It crumbles in your mouth like warm peat. You dunk it into the stew and chew slowly. The sauna is still, but the air carries the taste of usefulness. Not glamour, not show. Just things doing what they were made to do quietly, fully, without needing to be thanked. Though you might thank them anyway. You run your hand along the side of the soapstone pot. You feel the faint grain of the rock, the wear, the work, the way it held heat long enough for someone to be born or buried or bathed or fed. And you whisper, because it feels right. You did good. Steam rises again, thinner this time, with the scent of birch water deepened by time and silence. Someone has opened the sauna door just a crack to let in a breath of cold air, enough to make your skin sing, but not enough to disturb the stones. You pour a little more hot water over them anyway. Hiss. The warmth rolls over you again, and with it a soft reminder you are not alone. Because in ancient Karelia, water had ears. And tonight, we remember how to thank it. A mainstream fact in Karelian spiritual tradition, water was alive, aware, and worthy of respect. Lakes, rivers, springs, even wells, and bath buckets were seen not just as sources of life, but as homes for beings, spirits, memories, perhaps even gods in smaller clothes. So when you used water, especially for washing, you didn't just take. You asked. You reach now for the sauna bucket, a wide wooden pail lined with pine resin to keep it from leaking. The ladle sits on top, carved from birch, the handle smoothed from years of use. Before dipping it in, someone murmurs a few words. They sound casual, but they land gently. Not prayer exactly, more like a greeting. You copy them. Not because you know what they mean, but because they feel like the kind of words that belong near warm water. A quirky detail, some families believed that washing without permission, especially in steam, could make your skin forget itself. You'd feel clean, yes, but strange. Lighter. Like your soul had slipped a little sideways and forgotten how to return. To prevent this, people whispered to the water. Just a name, a phrase, a breath, and afterward a nod of thanks. You dip the ladle, pour it over your shoulders. The warmth slides down your back like a memory. There's no soap, just steam. No shampoo, just birch. And a gentle reminder that the body isn't something you fix. It's something you befriend. Researchers still debate whether these washing rituals were religious animist or simply well-mannered folklore. Some argue that water spirits were metaphors, ways to teach respect for shared resources. Others insist the spirits were real, and that anyone who mocked the bucket found themselves short of steam and long on bad luck. You lean forward now and pour more water into the basin. The ladle clinks against the rim. You see your reflection there, soft, fogged, a little too dreamlike to trust. But you thank it anyway, because the water here holds stories of women rinsing newborns, of men soaking aching legs after the hunt, of elders sitting in silence waiting for the right moment to remember who they once were. You wipe your arms with a linen cloth soaked in birch sap, The smell is sweet, grassy, oddly crisp. As you rub your wrists, you feel the heat sink deeper into your bones. The skin tingles not sharply, more like it's waking up from a long nap and needs a moment to remember its own shape. Someone next to you pours water on the stones again slowly so it doesn't hiss too loud. Loud steam might wake something that doesn't want to be seen just yet. A raven calls outside. The door stays closed. And the water, it stays warm. You dip your hands again. This time not to wash, just to feel. And you whisper, "Thank you," not because the water demands it, but because you do. The light inside the sauna is dim now, just the ember glow from the fire pit, and a faint line of gray where the door cracked open earlier. You sit low on the bench towel draped over your shoulders, legs warm, fingers pruned. The steam is gentler now. The stones have stopped spitting, and someone has brought in a bowl. It's wide, shallow. Soapstone, of course. Inside, a thick, pale stew barely bubbling, still holding heat. Bits of salted elk, thin root slices, and something greenish, maybe preserved nettle, maybe dried spruce tips. The broth smells like snow melt and bark. Tonight you eat, but not like a king, like a Karelian in winter. A mainstream fact, daily meals in ancient Karelia weren't feasts. They were about endurance, using what the forest gave, stretching it across days and seasons. Thick soups, stone-baked root cakes, grainy porridges stirred slow with flat sticks. You take the spoon handed to you, carved from alder. It's stained with age, the bowl worn smooth by mouths long gone. You dip it into the stew, scoop up something soft and slippery, and blow gently before tasting. The flavor is honest, earthy, slightly sour, warm in a way that isn't spicy but still carries intent. A quirky detail, it was common to store salt with ashes from specific hearth fires, ash from a birth, a funeral, or a particularly successful fish smoking. The mixture used sparingly was said to carry memory through winter. You taste it now, just a hint of fire under the elk. There's no table here, just laps, moss mats, a low soapstone shelf that also serves as a seat, a bed, and on unlucky days, a cutting board. Bread is passed next, dense flat, torn by hand. Rye and birch bark, baked on hot stones until it cracks but doesn't flake. You dip it in the stew. It absorbs slowly. You chew. It takes time. But you're not in a hurry. Researchers still debate whether these meals were purely practical or also spiritual. There are stories of cooking while whispering old names into the pot, of adding a pebble from a sacred spring into the soup for strength, of stirring clockwise unless someone had died that week. Tonight, no one speaks, not because there's nothing to say, but because silence tastes better with broth. You glance down at your spoon. There's a little chip at the edge, just enough to leak if you tilt too far. Someone kept using it anyway. You get it now. The stew doesn't need perfect tools, just warm hands. The bowl is nearly empty. A few scraps left soft roots, a bit of fat from the elk. You scrape them together, press them onto the last bit of bread, and eat slowly. Outside, snow crunches under someone's boots. You hear the sharp chuff of breath. Then the door creaks open briefly, and a wave of cold, pine-scented air rushes in. It smells like tomorrow. Someone's back from the woods, with herbs maybe, or a fish, or news from the other side of the lake. But for now they sit. They're handed a spoon. You pass the bread. And just like that, the stew continues, even when the bowl is nearly empty. Because in Karelia, the meal never ends. It simmers. Steam drifts soft again, looping through the rafters, like it's trying to remember something. The stones have quieted. The soup bowl sits empty now, wiped clean with bark bread, rinsed in a ladle of warm water, and set back on its side like a stone returning to its nest. No one speaks, but the sauna begins to shift. Because it's time for the next rhythm. Not a meal, not a scrub, but something else. Something leafy. Something whispered. Something that stings, then soothes. You take the birch whisk into your hands, and tonight we learn what it means to be gently beaten by leaves. A mainstream fact in Karelian and wider Finnish tradition, the vihta, a bundle of young birch branches bound with bark cord, was an essential sauna tool. Used for circulation, purification, massage, and ritual, it wasn't just a slapdash spa accessory. It was medicine memory and massage with personality. You dip yours into the water bucket. The leaves soften, release scent green sharp just on the edge of sweet. Like grass, thinking about being brave. You raise the vihta, and with your free hand, press it once to your chest. Not yet. First you greet it. A quirky detail, some families whispered thanks to the vihta before using it, thanking the birch tree that gave the branches the hands that tied the bundle, and the spirit of the leaves for being willing to wake your skin. Then you begin. A soft tap at the shoulder. A sweep down the back. A firmer swat across the thigh. Not punishment, not pain. Just pressure. Birch branches pressing heat into your muscles. Stirring the blood. Reminding you that your body is not just a carrier for thoughts. It's a story told in warmth and bruised sap. You shift now to the knees. Whisk. Tap. Across the arms. Under the collarbone. Around the back of the neck, where the cold used to live, but doesn't anymore. Researchers still wonder about the origins of the vihta ritual, whether it began purely for circulation, or whether it was always a kind of body prayer. There's no definitive answer. But in old stories, birch was the tree that knew how to listen. When nothing else answered, birch did. You pause, then hold the bundle high and let it fall once hard across your shoulders. You exhale. That's the one that wakes you. Someone across from you is doing the same. Their rhythm is slower, almost musical, like a lullaby made of leaves. Every few seconds, a new slap, then a pause, then another. You glance at the bucket. The water's turned faintly green. Not because it's dirty, because it's full of birch memory. A ladle is dipped, a fresh pour onto the stones. Hiss. This time the steam feels alive. It curls with shape, with scent. with a hush that presses in gently behind your ears and down the spine. And just like that, the Vichta becomes something more than branches. It becomes a translator. It tells the heat where to go. It tells the tension where to leave. And it tells you gently, insistently, with every leafy slap, that your body is still here, and still yours. You lay the Vichta down now across the bench beside you. It sighs. Just a little, maybe grateful, maybe spent. You run your fingers over the leaves. They're darker now, damp, but not done. You'll soak them again before the next round. But for now, you rest your hands in your lap. Let the heat soak deeper. Let the silence settle heavier. And somewhere outside, the birch trees sway. And remember, the birch leaves rest now soft and heavy on the bench beside you. Your skin is warm, humming gently where the branches touched, where the steam found its way under the collarbone behind the knees along the ridge of your spine. And still the sauna holds its breath. There's a shift in the air, small but certain, because someone is coming. Not a guest, not a neighbor, not someone alive in the usual way. Tonight, we make room for the midwife, the moss, and the spirit door. A mainstream fact in ancient Karelia, the sauna was more than a bathhouse. It was a sacred threshold, used not only for healing, but for birth, death, and spirit work. Midwives delivered babies in the warmth of steam. The sick were bathed here. The dying were washed for burial here. The soul moved through sauna air like breath through frost. And the midwife, she was the only one allowed to speak certain names aloud. You sit now, still towel-wrapped, as an older woman steps through the sauna door. Her back is bent. Her eyes are sharp. She carries a bundle of cloth, a shallow bowl of herbs, and a sprig of dried moss tied with red thread. She nods at the stones. She doesn't knock. She doesn't need to. She's been here before memory. A quirky detail many Karelian midwives refused to wear metal inside the sauna. No buckles, no rings, no belt pins. It was believed that iron could close doors the midwife might need to open, and that too much jingling might confuse the soul on its way in or out. She kneels now beside the stones, sprinkles a pinch of herbs into the water bucket. Birch, yes, but also meadow sweet, and maybe a thread of something older. She ladles water gently. The hiss is quieter this time. The steam rises slow curls like a question. The midwife begins to hum. Not for you, for the child she once helped bring into this world here, or the one who didn't arrive whole, or the woman who lay on the birch planks with sweat on her brow and hope clenched between her teeth. The moss in her hand is sacred. She sets it at the edge of the stones. It's not to be burned, not to be stirred, just placed, to mark the door. Researchers still debate how much of the midwife's work was practical and how much was ritual. She knew how to fold linen, how to bind herbs, how to stop a fever. But she also knew when to speak to no one in particular and ask them to wait outside until the blood stopped coming. And that, well, that's not in any recipe book. You sit now with your hands on your knees, listening. The steam smells different, not sharp, not sweet, just deep. The midwife stands. She lays a cloth over the bench, then sits, not with noise, not with ceremony, but with the presence of someone who's helped more people arrive than most will ever see leave. She touches the moss once, then leaves it. You don't know who she called into the room tonight, but you're glad they were invited properly, because steam holds stories, and so does moss tied in red thread. You look at the stones. They've gone quiet again, but not empty, never empty. And just for a moment, as your breath fogs gently in the air, you think you see someone sitting beside you, someone smaller, not new, not old, just waiting. The midwife has gone now, not abruptly, just softened into the steam, her bundle of cloth folded, her moss left quietly by the stones. No one says goodbye in the sauna. That would suggest someone actually leaves. You shift slightly on the bench. The air is still thick with birch and meadowsweet. The stones rest under their blanket of heat, silent and full. A ladle waits on the rim of the bucket, catching drips like thoughts that won't settle. And no one speaks. Not because there's nothing to say, but because quiet is the clearest prayer. A mainstream fact in traditional Karelian sauna culture. Silence was not just polite, it was essential. In times of illness, birth mourning, or spiritual tending, the sauna became a vessel of hush. Even laughter was whispered. Even fire was fed gently. Too much noise, it was said, could send the spirits sideways. You breathe slowly. Feel the warmth reach under your ribs, behind your knees, into the soft spaces where old aches like to sleep. The birch ladle drips again. One drop, then another. No one moves to stop it. Because rhythm matters here. A quirky detail, if someone dropped a ladle into the bucket during a healing sauna, it was considered a sign. Either the spirit was listening too closely, or someone had asked the wrong question. You pick the ladle up, turn it once in your hand. Don't pour yet. Just wait. Silence is doing its work. The woman across from you, she might be a healer, or just someone with quiet shoulders, closes her eyes. She places her hands on her belly, not in pain, just listening. To herself, to the room, to whatever it is that calls back only when you stop asking. Researchers still wonder how much of this sauna silence was ritualized health practice, and how much was communal knowledge, the way children learn not to touch fire, not to run in the snow without mittens, and not to fill a sacred room with chatter. Some say the quiet was to honor the spirits. Others say it was to hear them. You pour the water now. Not a splash, a suggestion. Hiss. The steam rises soft. It brushes your cheeks, curls behind your ears, presses into the hollows of your collarbone like a lullaby. And beneath it, your thoughts slow. Not because they're gone, because they're being held. You think of the woman with the moss, the baby that might have cried here, the old man who whispered his last breath to the stones, and the many, many souls who came here not to speak, but to be spoken to. Silence here is not emptiness, it's hospitality. You place the ladle back. No splash, no clink, just settling. You close your eyes. And now the steam speaks. The silence lingers, fragrant and heavy, like wool soaked in birch smoke and sunlight. Your breath is slow now. The stones haven't hissed in a while. The water has cooled just enough to drink if you needed it. No one does. Not yet. Because now it's time for soap. Or something very much like it. Tonight we scrub ourselves with soot and sand, and remember that in ancient Karelia, cleanliness was sacred. Yes, but also deeply clever. A mainstream fact. While ancient Karelians didn't have soap as we know it today, they practiced regular, careful hygiene using pine tar river sand, lye water, and soot ash. These weren't just for vanity or comfort. They were seen as essential tools of health ritual and social respect. You reach for a shallow bowl near the base of the bench. Inside is a mix of fine white ash, a pinch of salt, and something dark, almost sticky pine tar. It smells sharp, a little smoky, and entirely like something a forest would recommend. You scoop a bit out with your fingers, mix it with warm water, and begin to scrub gently along your arms. It doesn't foam, but it works. And your skin, warmed by steam, softens under your hands. A quirky detail, it was believed that soot could pull out sorrow, especially if it came from a family fire. Women saved the ash from hearths, where good news had been shared, births, engagements, safe returns, and stirred it into cleansing water during sauna sessions to remind the body how to receive joy. You press the mixture along your collarbone. Rinse. Then scrub gently at the knees where worry tends to collect. Or so they say. There's no soap dish here, no towels with stitched initials, just moss, a woven cloth, and heat so honest it leaves no room for self-deception. One of the older women begins washing her hair with a handful of rye flour. It darkens as it absorbs oil clumps slightly and is rinsed out with birch water mixed with horsetail and nettle. Her hair gleams afterward, not like a shampoo ad, but like roots just after rain. You follow her example. Rinse, massage. Let the grain fall back into the wash bucket. Researchers still wonder whether the Karelian obsession with sauna cleanliness was purely functional or had symbolic power. Some argue it was health lice infection grit. Others point to the social and spiritual stakes being clean meant being worthy of good luck. Or marriage. Or being remembered with affection when the moss finally grew over your roof. And still others say it was simply respect for the self, for the sauna, for the stones that had been listening since morning. You take a clean linen cloth now, dampened in a pail by the fire, and wipe down your face. You don't recognize the feel, but you recognize the feeling. Cleared. Someone dips a cup into the water and passes it to you. It's warm, faintly herbal, flavored with juniper and wood smoke. You drink, not because you're thirsty, but because it feels like closing a circle. One sip in, one rinse out. You're not perfect now, but you are present. The fire crackles once, the stones sigh, and your skin, scrubbed with soot and soothed with moss, remembers who it is, and who it might become the next time it steps through this door. The sun is slipping low behind the treetops, now sending its last threads of gold through the cracks in the sauna wall. You watch the light ripple across the smoke-darkened beams and settle on a pile of split firewood stacked with care by the door. Each log is a promise of warmth, of readiness, of time well spent and time yet to come. And tonight, we follow the rhythm of days, chopping wood, smoking fish, mending nets, and carrying water. All the quiet work that made Karelian life a steady heartbeat beneath the steam. A mainstream fact daily life in ancient Karelia was shaped by seasonal necessity and long memory. People rose early, worked slowly, and stayed in sync with the woods, the weather, and each other. There were no clocks, only chores that knew when they needed to begin. You step out of the sauna, now wrapped in wool feet, still warm from the steam. The snow crunches softly under your toes. You walk a few paces toward the smokehouse, a low timber hut with a single chimney where fish and meat are strung from birch rods, blackened by resin and time. Inside, someone turns a row of white fish, checking the skin for blister, the oil for drip. A bit more smoke, they say. A bit more time. Then they'll cool on flat stones while the bark bread bakes nearby in a stone-lined pit. Back outside, a child carries a basket of alder kindling to the edge of the woodpile. The logs are cut to fit the sauna stove no larger than your wrist, no longer than your arm. Anything else, and the stones don't heat right. A quirky detail, it was said that wood split in silence burns the cleanest, and that if you spoke while chopping the logs might burn with attitude, crackling too loud or smoking too sharp. You watch now as a woman fills a clay trough with water from the stream, cold, fast-moving, edged with ice. She uses a ladle carved with notches. Not decorative, just a tally. She's counting how many buckets the fire will need tomorrow. Researchers still explore how much of Karelian daily life was driven by ritual structure versus practical habit. But when they find soapstone pot shards near fish bones and soot-blackened hearthstones near carved sled runners, they understand every task was layered. Chopping was prayer. Sweeping was conversation. Carrying water was a lesson in strength and silence. You walk along the path now, past the low shed, where bark strips are soaking, soon to be twisted into rope, or woven into baskets, or used to patch the bottom of someone's boot. Near the shed, a fire burns low. 2 men sit beside it, mending a fishing net with bone needles. The mesh is fine, carefully knotted, smelling of smoke and last summer's lake. They don't speak. They don't need to. Because the work has its own voice. You crouch and warm your hands by the fire. One of the men hands you a small soapstone weight, round, smooth, pierced through the center. It's tied to the edge of the net used to keep it steady in the water. He nods. You nod back. It's enough. And as the last of the sun slides behind the ridge, the chores wind down. Not finished. Just paused. Because in Karelia work is never really done. Only rested. You return to the sauna, where the air still holds the last of the day's steam. The ladle rests by the bucket, The birch branches have wilted, slightly fragrant and used. You sit again and listen, not for voices, not for stories, just for the sound of a day done well. The stars have arrived. Not suddenly, but gradually, like someone peeling back a blanket of dusk and tucking pinpricks of light into the folds. Outside the sauna, the world has gone blue and quiet. Inside the stones are cooler, but the air still hums with yesterday's warmth and tomorrow's work. And your stomach. It's curious, because now it's time for snowmelt soups and springtime riddles, that sacred, silly, and soul-feeding stretch of the Karelian year when the frost breaks, the herbs return, and old stories finally come up for air. A mainstream fact: the arrival of spring in ancient Karelia was marked not just by planting, but by cleansing storytelling and eating the first fresh things the earth offered. After months of preserved roots, dried fish, and ash-thick stews, spring brought nettles, young shoots, and snowmelt broth, light green and hopeful. You sip now from a wooden bowl of early season soup. It's thin, fragrant, full of chopped sorrel, a few shavings of dried turnip, and a base of boiled snow water steeped with pine buds. No salt, just flavor from the trees. A quirky detail, the first broth of the spring melt was sometimes poured on doorsteps or around garden beds to wake the soil. In one village, it was tradition to place a hot bowl of melt soup in the sauna as a thank you to the stones for surviving the long cold. You set your bowl down, warmed by the simplicity of it, and someone from across the bench asks a question: what has no mouth but sings and no legs but runs into the fire? You pause, smile. This is how spring comes in Karelia, not with trumpets, but with riddles. Researchers still uncover fragments of Karelian oral tradition, short verses, half-remembered rhymes, questions with no written answers, but deeply understood rhythms. The sauna was where many of these were passed on, not in formal lessons, but in steam-wrapped evenings, bellies full, minds slow. You answer the ladle. They nod. Another one. I live in the dark, I burn in the light. I disappear when you speak to me. You think. Whisper the hush. They smile this time, because riddles weren't for winning. They were for remembering. For reminding everyone that cleverness matters even when your hands are red from hauling buckets and your hair smells like smoke. And sometimes riddles were used to distract the spirits. A third one: what walks without feet, rests without stopping, and knocks when no one is home? No one answers, no one needs to, because some riddles aren't meant to be solved. Just shared, like soup, like silence. Like the first green thing poking through a frost-bitten field, uncertain, but brave. You sip the last of your broth. It tastes a little like yesterday's snow and tomorrow's hope. Someone cracks a smile. A child sneezes in the corner. The door opens for a moment, just long enough to let in a sliver of moonlight and the scent of wet bark and thawing soil. It smells like spring. You lean back on the bench, tuck your legs beneath you, and close your eyes. There's no ceremony here. Just warm soup, good riddles, and enough steam left in the stones to make the night feel like it knows your name. The stars have arrived not suddenly, but with the patience of old friends. They appear one by one, winking above the black tree line, mirrored faintly in the icy puddles that dot the path outside. The snow crunches beneath your feet as you step back from the root cellar, arms full of memory-laced jars, your breath curling like steam against the cold. In your hands, cloudberries preserved in honey and a small clay pot sealed with wax. It's heavier than you'd expect for its size. You can already taste the anticipation, the kind of flavor that only exists after waiting months for the thaw. Because tonight, it's time for snowmelt soups and springtime riddles. You return to the main cabin where the hearth glows low and a kettle swings gently above the fire. The tea has already begun, infused with pine tips, dried yarrow, and the sharp tang of early nettle. But the real prize of spring, nestled in a shallow birch bowl, is the broth made from the first meltwater of the season, clear cold, slightly metallic, like the last bite of winter. A mainstream fact. In ancient Karelia, snowmelt wasn't simply a change of season. It was an event. Families collected the first runoff in clay pots, sometimes even digging narrow channels in the snow to guide the water into bark troughs. That water was considered the purest, especially if drawn before sunrise. It was used to brew tea wash infants' bless doorways and cook the year's first soup. And so you stir it now, a thin broth with slivers of dried root vegetables, sorrel, and perhaps a shaved wild onion dried from the previous summer's harvest. The soup is humble, clear, with a pale green hue, like new leaves just thinking about opening. You dip a spoon, taste it, and pause. It tastes light, alive. Not strong, but certain, like something that remembers its own name. Around the fire, the others gather. The youngest of the group leans forward and grins mischievously. Want to riddle? And just like that, spring arrives. A quirky detail. Riddling was a favorite springtime pastime in ancient Karelia, especially during evenings after the snowmelt, when travel was still difficult, but work hadn't fully resumed. These riddles weren't just entertainment. They were used to teach memory, sharpen wit, and some said confuse the spirits who might still be lingering after the long winter. The child clears their throat. What has no feet but follows you home? Sings when it's warm, hides when you moan. You chew on a piece of bark bread and think. The group waits in silence, not impatient, just curious. Your answer, steam. They nod solemnly like you've passed some invisible test. Someone else joins in. I grow without planting. I fall without crying. I run only once, then sleep for a year. Another pause. The thaw, someone whispers. Correct again. The kettle whistles faintly as someone ladles tea into wide, handleless cups. You sip. The taste is green, slightly bitter, slightly sweet. It's exactly what your mouth has forgotten it was missing. And then one more. What walks into every room but never leaves footprints. This time the whole group smiles before answering in unison. Spring. There are no prizes, no teams, no winners. Only the hush that follows each answer, like the riddle opened a small door and let a breeze through. A scholarly debate persists about the origins of these riddles. Were they passed down orally from village to village, or imported with trade and shaped by local myth? Some researchers suggest a Baltic or Finno-Ugric connection. Others believe they arose independently, as most things do, out of long winters and clever minds. You look down at your soup again. The bowl is nearly empty. Only a few strands of green remain, spiraled like little questions left for tomorrow. Someone offers you the last piece of bread, warm and slightly burned at the edges. You tear it, gently dipping one corner into the broth, soaking up the final taste of the melt. As the night deepens, the riddles slow. Laughter softens. Someone leans against the log wall and hums a tune older than any recipe. The fire pops. Outside, the snow continues its quiet surrender. Inside, you drink the final sip and smile. Because in ancient Karelia, spring didn't start with sunlight. It started with a riddle, a bowl of soup, and the feeling that something new was waiting just outside the door. The stars outside now shimmer like the surface of still lake water before the first fish stirs a sky so clear it makes the dark look delicate. The wind is resting. The fire is low. And back inside the cabin, the last bowl has been set aside, cleaned not with soap, but with bread and silence. You're still warm from the soup, still thoughtful from the riddles, and now you notice a subtle shift. A doorway slightly ajar. A shadow that wasn't there a moment ago. Because here in Karelia, some things share your home, whether or not you light a lamp for them. Tonight you learn to walk softly around the spirits in the rafters and brooms by the door. A mainstream fact. Ancient Karelian belief systems included a wide network of household spirits, the Kotihaltija, or home elf, the sauna spirit, the barn guardian, and others, each attached to specific places, objects, or daily rituals. These were not ghost stories told to scare children. These were respected members of the invisible household. You notice first, the broom leaned gently bristles up beside the cabin door. Not by accident, not for tidiness, but to signal respect. A quirky detail sweeping after sunset was strictly avoided. It was believed to sweep away the luck of the house, or worse, to offend the Kotihaltija. Some said you could accidentally sweep a soul into the cold. Others said the sound of bristles on floorboards after dark attracted spirits curious, and not always kindly ones. The hearth glows faintly. Not much wood left, but enough to keep the tea warm and the shadows long. You settle near it. Above you in the high rafters, a small carving rests between two beams, not hidden, but quiet. A bit of birch wood tied with red thread, its edges worn by time. Perhaps it's a marker, or a ward, or simply something left by someone who didn't want to explain. No one has touched it in years, and no one plans to. You listen. The room's not empty. Not loud either, but present. You hear a cup shift gently on a shelf with no help. You hear the soft shuffle of a broom bristle against its post. And in the far corner of the cabin, a woven pouch dangles slightly from a peg. Inside, someone once tucked a clove of dried garlic, a silver button, and 3 pine needles, just in case. Researchers have unearthed many similar pouches in ancient Karelian homes, amulets made from plant and household materials hidden in wall crevices or sewn into the folds of beds. Some were found near sauna entrances, others under thresholds. Their meanings aren't always recorded, but they were intentional. As you sip from your cup, you watch someone across the room light a small piece of resin bark and wave the smoke gently toward the hearth. They murmur a few syllables, not a chant, not quite a blessing, just familiar words for whoever's listening. The Kotihaltija prefers order, the sauna spirit prefers warmth, and the rafters, well, they prefer you leave them be. But if you do, they'll keep your soup from burning. They'll keep your door from sticking. And once in a while, they'll let you find your missing spoon. You set your cup down, and before rising, you nod toward the shelf, toward the broom, toward the carving overhead. Not because you're superstitious, but because you've noticed things go better when you do. At the door, you pause. A small sliver of bread has been placed near the threshold, tucked into the corner, crumbled just enough that it no longer looks edible, but still counts as a gift. It's not for mice, it's for the house itself. Some say the spirit of a home sleeps lightly, always listening. And if you feed it, greet it, and never sweep too loudly, it might even whisper back. You push open the door gently. Snow greets you like an old friend with cold hands. The broom stays in place. The hearth continues to glow. And somewhere behind you, something small and unseen settles back into its favorite corner, satisfied. Because in Karelia, a quiet home is not just a peaceful one, it's a respected one. You step outside once more, breath rising in clouds beneath the stars, boots crunching softly over snow, pressed smooth by many footsteps, some of them yours, some far older. The wind has calmed entirely now. Even the trees seem to listen. And down below the cabin, nestled into the slope beneath a layer of earth, moss and snow-dusted stones, waits the root cellar. Not just a storage space, a library of summer bound in clay salt and the hush of early autumn. Tonight we descend into that quiet and open jars filled with pickled thoughts and preserved berries. You lift the heavy wooden lid, its hinges groaning faintly with the cold. The steps descend steeply, each one lined with flat stones, slick with condensation. The air inside is damp, sharp, and tinged with vinegar salt and the slow memory of fermentation. Your lantern throws amber light along the walls. You see rows of birch bark jars, wide-lipped crocks, and small clay pots sealed with beeswax. Labels no need. Everyone who lives here remembers which jar holds what because each one was filled with intention. A mainstream fact food preservation in ancient Karelia wasn't simply survival. It was ritual. Each ingredient had a time, a mood, and a reason. Lingonberries picked after the first frost. Pike dried over alder smoke. Mushrooms soaked in brine laced with fire ash and herbs. Cabbage packed with juniper twigs to keep it honest. You run your hand along the top row. One jar feels warmer than the others, not from heat, but from familiarity. You lift it carefully. Inside, a honey-thick preserve of cloudberries, golden and pulpy, still bright, even after months in the dark. You don't open it. Not yet. It's not time. A quirky detail, the first jar of each batch was often set aside for a specific moment, a birth, a wedding, the return of someone from far away, or even just the coldest night of the year. Opening it early was frowned upon, not for reasons of spoilage, but because you'd be robbing the future of its moment. You step deeper into the cellar. The floor is packed earth, softened with straw. A few stones still bear faint tool marks from when the space was carved out, maybe 50, maybe 200 winters ago. No one remembers anymore. The cellar simply is. You light a small resin wick and set it in a dish near the corner. The glow reveals another shelf, this one with jars of salted fish, and another filled with root vegetables in brine so thick it barely moves. Between two crocks, someone has tucked a bundle of dried herbs and a tiny wooden figurine, a carved face with a smile and one chipped eye. You smile back, because down here, among the pickles and roots and berry glazes, you start to feel the weight of care, of all the hands that packed these jars, of all the days they were meant for, of all the trust in the idea that summer can be folded into something that waits patiently in the cold. Researchers have found cellars like this sometimes completely intact, even after centuries. In one site, near Lake Ladoga, they uncovered dozens of clay jars sealed with wax and resin. Inside remnants of preserved wild plums, fish scales, birch bark, scraps used as flavoring. The cellar had collapsed, but the food remembered. You find an old jar at the far end of the shelf. It's chipped, covered in soot. Covered. The lid has a small pine cone pressed into the wax, a kind of seal perhaps, or maybe just a family marker. You lift it. Inside something black, sticky, smelling of molasses and pine resin. Maybe an experiment. Maybe a tradition long forgotten. You laugh softly. Some jars hold recipes. Some hold mysteries. You set it back gently where it belongs and take one final look around. The air is colder now. The lantern flickers. But you don't feel rushed, because this room, quiet, cool, purposeful, is the reason the warm rooms exist at all. Preservation isn't just about food. It's about memory. You run a hand along the moss-covered shelf, whisper a soft thanks, and ascend, carrying nothing, but filled with the knowledge that when the season turns, the jars will be waiting, and they'll remember you, even if you forget them for a little while. The root cellar closes behind you with a low thump, as though it's exhaling after holding its breath for too long. Your hands are cold now, fingers tinged pink, the air biting just enough to remind you that the season isn't done with its edge. But your chest is warm, your thoughts steadier, and somewhere deep in your belly, you feel that strange kind of comfort that comes from trusting something old to carry you forward. You follow the path back to the main cabin. The snow has softened under your steps, crusted slightly on top the way it does after a few hours of calm. Inside, the glow of the hearth is steady. The door is cracked, not open, as if someone had left it that way on purpose to let one last memory through. Because tonight, we're sitting with what's been broken, boiled, wrapped, and restored. Tonight, we're sitting with what happens when the pot cracks and the fire forgets. A mainstream fact. Soapstone pots, ubiquitous in ancient Karelia, were passed down patched revered, even when they cracked. When one finally broke beyond use, it wasn't always discarded. Sometimes it was repurposed as a hearthstone, a storage jar, or buried near the home like a retired tool that had earned its rest. You step inside and see it immediately. A broken soapstone vessel rests in the corner of the cabin near the wall where the wind moans against the logs. Someone has laid a folded cloth inside it, maybe to keep it from gathering dust, or maybe as a way to hold its dignity. The crack runs clean down one side, splitting the pot like an old scar, but it hasn't fallen apart. Someone has tied it with grass cord, wrapped twice, and knotted with a twist that looks far too practiced to be casual. You sit beside it. Touch the rim. It's cold, but not unkind, but not. A quirky detail, when a cooking pot cracked in winter, especially after long use, it was said to be mourning the fire. Some families would leave a spoonful of broth in the pot for one final night before cleaning it and setting it aside, giving it time to release the meal it had carried. You smile, not out of pity, but respect, because everything here lives long and retires gently. The hearth glows low nearby. You stir the coals with a flat stick, not to rekindle them, just to check their mood. One ember flares, then sighs. You leave it alone. Someone else walks in quietly, brushing snow from their sleeves. They don't speak, just crouch by the pot, pull a small soapstone chip from their pocket, set it beside the rim. A kind of offering, a gesture, like saying, "You're not forgotten." A moment passes, and then slowly they light a pine taper, hold it above the fire, and let it catch. The flame flickers, then steadies. They press the taper's light toward the broken pot just for a second, just long enough to cast a warm glow across the fracture line. Then they blow it out. Researchers debate whether these rituals were animistic reverence or simply markers of value tools seen not as sacred beings, but as companions. But field notes from Karelian oral historians contain more than a few stories of pots that cracked at the right time, of stoves that went cold to protect the family, and of fires that dimmed so the spirits could sleep easier. You stretch your legs toward the fire. Someone sets a bowl of thin barley porridge beside the coals. Not for eating. For the kotihaltija, perhaps, or the cold, or whatever wanders this cabin while everyone sleeps. And you understand now that letting go isn't the same as forgetting. The fire doesn't burn like it used to, but it doesn't need to. The room is warm enough for sleep. The cracked pot rests dignified and still full of stories it'll never tell. You touch the grass cord around its middle one last time, then return to your place by the hearth, and listen to the gentle rhythm of wood settling, stones cooling, and silence remembering. Outside, the world has folded into midnight. The last breeze has dropped away, the snow has gone still, and the trees no longer creak. They simply wait. The cabin is wrapped in layers of silence, the hush of old logs, the breath of embers, and the quiet sigh of your body realizing it's done more remembering than moving today. The sauna door stands slightly open. No one's in a rush to close it. Because this final return isn't about cleansing. It's about something older, something slower. Tonight you return for the last ladle, the last lullaby, and the letting of ash rest. A mainstream fact. In Karelia, the sauna was where things ended as well as began. It was the place of final baths for the dead, the last warmth before long journeys, and the setting for ceremonial closures, shutting a home, honoring a season, or saying farewell to something too heavy to carry onward. You walk slowly across the snow-packed path. The sky is deep cobalt now. The stars have settled. The air is so cold it bites through wool, but only at the edges. Inside you, there's enough warmth left from the fire, the soup, the stories to carry you forward. You cross the threshold. The sauna welcomes you without sound. Inside the stones are no longer hot, but not yet cold. The air holds the barest trace of birch. The bucket is nearly empty. The ladle rests across its rim, tilted slightly, as though someone set it there with care and a quiet intention not to return soon. You step softly, sit low, and breathe. The last ladle is never meant to hiss. It is a goodbye, poured with reverence. You lift the ladle, feel the weight of the water in your hand. There's only enough for one offering. You dip, tilt. Let the stream fall in a slow arc onto the stones. No crackle, no hiss. Just steam that curls like a fading ribbon. Thin, lingering, almost not there. A quirky detail, some Karelian families believed that the final pour of the night had to be poured in silence. Speaking during the last ladle might invite the spirit of the stones to follow you home, restless and half awake. But if you let the steam rise quietly, it would stay here, tucked in with the ashes and the moss, like a cat curling into its favorite corner. You sit still. The steam curls upward, then outward, then disappears. There is no rush to move, only time to reflect. In the dim light, the outline of the old vichta hangs drying on its peg, crisping, now edges curling. The ladle leans. The bench is warm under your hands, not from heat, from memory. You murmur something into the air. It's not a word, not a blessing, just a shape your breath makes when you're ready to leave something behind. A scholarly debate lingers about whether these quiet closures were pagan rites, communal habit, or simply the side effect of living in a land where winters make noise, feel too heavy. But written fragments, interviews, and archaeological finds all point to the same truth. The sauna was not abandoned. It was paused. You rise. Step toward the fire pit one last time. Beside it, a small folded cloth has been laid over the ash. Not to clean, but to cover. A way to let the fire sleep with dignity. You kneel. Place your hand gently on the stone slab next to the stove. not pressing, just thanking. The ladle stays behind. The water bucket rests empty and untroubled, and you close the door not with force, but with a gesture like pulling a blanket over someone who's already dreaming. Outside, the stars blink softly, and inside, the sauna sleeps, steamless, soundless, but full. You linger in the cabin longer than usual. Not because there's anything left to do. Every bowl has been rinsed, every log either burned or stacked for tomorrow. But because your body, like the house, needs one final hour to settle. Not to sleep, just to conclude. The hush in the room is thicker now, like wool. It doesn't press, it simply wraps. You sit by the hearth again, not too close, just near enough to feel the faint breath of heat still lingering beneath the ashes. In front of you, the ladle rests across the water bucket, fully dry. The handle points toward the window, as if to say the last pour was done. The stones are satisfied, and even the steam is ready to lay down. You don't speak. There's no one to speak to. And besides, the room already feels full with stories, with breaths, with the low humming memory of all who sat here before. Tonight we hold space for everything that doesn't get folded into a basket or swept into a pile. We hold space for softness that doesn't ask to be named. A mainstream fact. In ancient Karelian homes, especially during transitional times between seasons, births, or even the building of a new home, it was common to spend time in intentional stillness. This was not idleness. It was a kind of ritualized pause, a collective exhale that allowed a family, or even a whole village, to let the rhythm of silence rise back up and lead again. You lie back on the low bench legs, curled slightly, arm draped across your midsection. The wooden wall at your back is warm in a fading kind of way, like fire that's chosen to remember, not resist. The rafters above hold the dark gently, and something in you shifts. Not a dramatic revelation, just the small, settled knowing that nothing needs to be added. That you, the fire, the jar of cloudberries still sealed on the shelf, the ladle, the soot, and even the faint scrape of last summer's sandals on the floorboards, you've all done your part. Someone places a linen cloth over the cracked soapstone bowl in the corner. Not to hide it, just to give it privacy. Another reaches up and turns the carved token above the door upside down, a sign that tonight's chapter has been closed. The spirits are no longer being asked to watch. They are now simply welcome to rest. You watch, not because you need to help, but because you need to witness. A quirky detail. Some elders in Karelia believed that the final hour of the evening, especially after sauna and shared soup, was when the walls breathed deepest. It was a time when thoughts should walk quietly, so as not to echo too loudly into the rafters where memory lives. You shift slightly on the bench and feel the warmth settle deeper into your joints. Outside, a slow flurry has begun again. Inside, not a single voice has risen in over an hour. The house doesn't need words to know it is loved. You walk the room slowly one last time. You check the kettle, not warm, but still aromatic. You glance at the ladle and nod. You move the firewood just slightly to make room for the next armful someone will bring in the morning. You fold a cloth and place it over the small wooden stool near the door. Not out of necessity, but out of rhythm. Because when all is done and the chores have ended, care continues. Care doesn't always look like doing. Sometimes it looks like stillness that stays behind after motion has gone. You settle again this time on the moss mat near the hearth. The floor is cool beneath your fingertips. Your eyes fall gently shut. You hear the house not creaking, not sighing, just being. And in that space for just a moment, you realize the steam was never the point. The birch branches weren't the point. Nor the soup, the stories, the broken pot, or even the sauna. The point was simply to be present for it all. To notice. To name softly. And then to let it go. You curl onto your side. And the bench, the coals, the low beam above your head, and the red thread still tied around the birch carving by the window, they all settle too. The room knows it is enough. So do you. The last ember fades beneath the ash, not extinguished, just eased into sleep. You lie still beneath a light wool covering the kind that smells faintly of smoke and last year's linen. The night presses gently at the windows, not to come in, but to keep the warmth inside cradled. Somewhere near the stove, a wooden spoon shifts slightly in a bowl. The sound is so soft it feels imagined. You listen harder. Nothing but the breath of the rafters. Outside, snow falls with intention. Large flakes drifting in slow spirals, layering over earlier steps. Smoothing the sharpness of corners, blanketing everything that no longer needs to be sharp or clear. The jar of berries rests on the shelf unopened, waiting for a colder night. The cracked bowl rests with dignity under its folded cloth. And the house, silent and watched over, exhales with you. You breathe in. It smells like cooled birch, clay, ash, and moss that remembers your hands. You breathe out, letting go of the stirring, the listening, the small, loving work of remembering, letting your thoughts slide down into the roots of the cabin, into the sleep of soapstone and snow. This is not an end. It's a turning inward, a folding in, a quiet that wraps around the bones and says, "You may rest now." And so you do.